Hi guys, let's play a bit with our friend the Black Lantern Batman. Essentially, a few people have been asking for a DPS video with Celestial. Just a fair warning, I don't really play DPS per se. Usually, what I'll do is that I usually play roles like 90% of the time. So in the case of Celestials, I'll play as a healer most of the time. The only time where I'll play as a DPS is if I'm playing solo. Or if somehow we don't need a healer in the group and we need an extra DPS, then sure I could switch to DPS. But that's not really what I do. So just a fair warning. Also, the loadout that I'm using, I'm pretty sure it's not the most powerful or effective loadout out there when it comes to Celestials. I didn't do all that much research to try to find a good Celestial loadout. Although I have to admit, I did a tiny bit of research, and holy crap, that trying to find a loadout that actually makes some sort of sense is a bit challenging to say the least. There's either a lot of outdated information or incomplete information. So essentially, what I will show you is a loadout that works for me. So if you use this loadout, at the very least, you should be able to do what I do. If you're looking for a more advanced or more effective loadout, I'll see what I can do about trying to find more information about that. But let's get started with what I do and what seems to work for me. So let's get started with the actual loadout that I'm using. So essentially with this character, I'm using the Power Hunt. I'm using Malediction. Life Drain is the supercharge that I am using. I'm using a Plague. Oh, so, this is the wrong one. And essentially, I'm using Airburst as my breakout move. And the last move I use is Consume Soul. So let's imprint. Essentially, I changed my skills not too long ago. I'll show you why. So essentially, this is the only non-celestial ability that I'm using for reasons. Essentially, I like to have a breakout move, especially with Celestial. You get interrupted or knocked down quite a lot. So having a breakout move in addition to the breakout trinket, it's a good idea in my book. Also, there is a okay by default, Celestial is what you would know as a precision power. There are powers. Normally, when you use a power, your power is supposed to be stronger depending on how much might you have. That's more or less how it works with most of the powers. So when you use a power, your might is what usually determines the amount of damage you will make. But in the case of Celestial, there's a few exceptions also. Essentially, combo-based power like Celestials and Hardlight, those actually depend on precision, not power. But there is an exception to that, is that the atomic combos actually depends on might as opposed to precision. But for Celestial, precision is what you need, not really might. Not sure why I was saying power. And also, there is another thing about Celestial is that if you're using a weapon, a melee weapon instead of a range weapon, you will get an extra. I think it's 15% extra damage. Oh, just let me make sure. I just don't want to confuse the. Essentially, it's 15% if you're using. I'll get it someday. Okay, sorry about that. So essentially, if you're having a melee weapon equipped, you're going to do 15% extra damage with your power. And also, if you don't have any weapon masteries unlocked, you're going to get an additional 5% to your attack. So normally, if you have a melee weapon and if you don't have weapon mastery, you should be able to do 20% extra damage with your character. So in this case, for a while I was tempted to into using and blasters. I don't know why. It's one of my favorite weapons. I really enjoy using the combos. But for this, essentially I went back to using martial arts. And also you'll notice I did not purchase the weapon masteries. So the weapon masteries is still locked. And what I ended up doing instead is that I ended up purchasing all the critical, what is known as the criticals. So in this case, there's like the critical attack damage, which gives 4% extra attack damage per point. And also I ended up purchasing the critical attack chances, which gives 1 extra percent of a critical attack chance. And obviously, since I purchased it 3 times, it's 3%. Just as at the other one, I purchased it 3 times, so it's 12%. And essentially, I purchased the criticals in every single trees. Why did I purchase the criticals instead of maybe instead trying to unlock the 25 extra might and the 25 extra precision? And again, times 3, that would mean 75 extra might and 75 extra precision. Because I much believe that 1%, an extra chance of criticals is much more important than just 75 extra precision. Essentially, 75 extra precision represents 7.5 DPS, which is okay, I suppose. But if you do let's say 4,000 extra damage, if you do critical and if you do a critical and you do like 20% extra damage out of 4,000, well, that's going to be a lot more than your 75, your 7.5 extra DPS you're going to make. And right now our character has, well, let's take a look. Right now my precision is 1815, which isn't all that much. There's 2 reasons. Well, there's a few reasons for that. The main reason is that I DPS using healer gear. As I mentioned before, I'm pretty much a guy who plays roles first, and then once in a while I'll play as a DPS if I really have to. So usually I'll play DPSs that don't have all that much DPS gear. I was planning to use the Science Spire to show a bit how the rotation works, but I had to play it in order to be able to get some martial art weapon. So I guess we're going to have to do another mission. Let's use the blast adapter before I forget. Sometimes there's a few what I would call anomalies, but sometimes you will try to test your damage out on, let's say, the sparring target, and you will realize that your DPS doesn't do all that much damage, and let's say your healer for some reasons, but the sparring targets aren't the best. They're one way to try and test out how much damage you produce, but there's a lot of factors that they don't really enter. There's a lot of factors that influence how much damage you will make, and sometimes the sparring targets will be a little misleading. Like if you're doing damage to like 20, if you're doing area of effect damage to like 20 creatures at the same time, it will pretty much make a huge difference in how much damage you make versus if you try to do damage to one single sparring target. So if you use a lot of powers that do damage to multiple target and somehow only attack one sparring target, it will sometimes it will look bad. Like your character that normally does a lot of damage could look like it doesn't do all that much damage against one single target. So anyway, enough rambling around. Let's go and do play a mission. And I'll essentially I wanted to do the Science Spire, but I needed a martial art weapon, and I was lucky enough to get it from that mission. So let's go for the Deep Desires instead. So technically, my character should do 20% extra damage compared to the last time I was here.
All of it. Then we'll squash Jesse and take over this joint.
But the sad part is that I won't be able to use Weapon Mastery if somehow I run out of power. One of the challenging bits of Celestial is that you get interrupted a lot sometimes. And when you do get interrupted a lot, you have to pretty much try to restart your combos. And also, you will lose a bit of power thanks to that. So essentially, what I do first, you have to use the weapon combos, the power combos of Celestials. That's pretty much what the whole power is about. And also, if you use the essentially the combos, you should benefit from the advanced mechanic, which gives you back some power. So essentially, if you chain one combo after the next, you will get a bit of power back, and usually you will get pretty much all your power back. And as you can see, I'm being juggled quite a lot. So sometimes in certain fights, you don't really have time to be able to try and execute your longer combo. So sometimes I'll cheat a bit and I'll do the combos outside of combat to make sure that I do execute them. And even then, you saw the evil demon jumped at me. It happens. So in certain fights, when I see that there's no way I can execute my longer combos, you'll pretty much see that I'm pretty much cycling through the same two powers because they're a bit they can be executed a bit quicker. So the chances of being interrupted are, well, let's say, smaller, but they're still there, as you just saw. It's one of the complaints that some people have with Celestial, that you do get interrupted quite a lot. When I say interrupted, I essentially talk about everything that knocks you down, like being knocked down, being juggled, being all of that. Even though there's technical terms, whenever I say interrupted, I mean all of those. Like sometimes you'll talk about being interrupted, and people will try to be to play the semantic card, where they'll say, no, you weren't interrupted, you were juggled, or you were knocked down. Because interrupted in game literally means being interrupted thanks to the counter mechanics. But outside of the game, there's this little word meaning being interrupted, which actually has a literal meaning of being stopped halfway through an action. So as you can see, you pretty much don't use your weapons unless you're very desperate. With your power combos, you should be able to do fine, and you should be able to get pretty much all the power back you need to be able to cast as much as you want. But if you get interrupted too much, yeah, it could happen that you actually run out of power. And as you can see, even though I'm in DPS role, I still do get a bit of health back. That's because essentially I went for powers that allow me to get some health back, even if I'm in DPS role. It's not a huge healing, but very often, especially during a long fight, the little bit of healing you keep on getting through the whole fight can make a bit of difference. It can mean you being alive or not at the end of the fight. Essentially, I see a lot of DPSs who are so focused on just doing damage that they have nothing that gives them a bit of survivability. So yeah, they can produce a lot of damage for 2 or 3 seconds, but then they're dead because they just cannot survive until the end of the fight. Personally, I prefer to have a more a more diverse character, a character that will be able to do a bit of damage, but that will be able to survive through the fight as well.
Hello, what have you got? I'm sure I want it too. You can't have what's mine. Piece of
So for essentially my attack buff will also give me some health if I actually execute the celestial combo like this here. So I will get both an attack buff and also all my attacks will essentially give me a bit of life back. But it's a fairly long combo to execute. So ideally you try to execute it while your enemies are being stunned or something like that. Well, let's see if we could use the boots. Nah, didn't think so. So let's go for the mark of victory. So ideally the longer combos like this one here, you try to do them while your enemies are incapacitated, either when they're stunned or knocked down or something like that. But it's not always an option, so.
With all this sinful energy, I'm gonna heat up the tunnel, the mid-lane, and then the whole damn wasteland.
And especially when there's multiple enemies, sometimes you manage to knock down one of them, but the other 2 or 3 sadly stop you from executing your combos. It happens. Ideally, you try to stun him first, and then you try to execute your longer combo. And this one here is my what you would call my damage over time. So when you cast that, you do a bit of damage. Also, it seems to give you back a bit of life. So combined with essentially, if I can manage to combine both my powers, like this one and then this one, then you see a lot of green numbers coming in, healing my character. And ideally, even if all the enemies are dead, finish your combo. That way you will get some power back. Obviously, if your power bar is full, doesn't really matter. But if your power bar is not full, then take the time to finish your combo, even if your enemies are all gone. Again, it's not a big deal, but it could help a bit.
Hey, dummy! Don't do that! I mean, whatever, I don't care.
Also, this here serves as my pull move if I ever really need it. You'd be surprised how often being able to pull the enemies just a few at a time actually helps a lot. sometimes you're going to be able to pull the enemies one at a time and fight them one at a time. Although some other times you will try to pull one enemy and all his friends will follow. I'm not sure if it's scripted or if it's just bad luck of the draw sometimes. So ideally, you try to execute your combo
Better not be doing what I think you're doing.
before the evil enemies interrupt you. And again, trying to stun them first does help a bit. Although sometimes they break out of your stuns pretty quick. And you could think that it's because I'm in DPS mode. But even as a controller, there's enemies that there's just nothing you can do. They break out of your stuns as soon as you actually stun them. So as you can see, this rotation pretty much works well enough. There's probably a more powerful one or a more effective one, but at the very worst, you should be able to do what I do. And also, as you saw, sometimes it'll take a few seconds to set up your combo. So if you're playing with a DPS that plays, let's say, Ice or Earth, where they do a lot of damage very quickly, sadly, sometimes by the time you're done setting up your combo, pretty much all the enemies will be dead. So it will look bad on the scoreboard. So ideally, I would suggest don't worry too much about the scoreboard. But a lot of people, as you can see, I keep on getting interrupted or knocked down or all that good stuff. And sometimes even breaking out, you get knocked back again or stunned again multiple times. You get what I like to call chained stun or chained knocked out, knocked back. I mean, so that even if you break out, as soon as you're done breaking out, you become stunned again. I'm not sure why, because I was under the impression that you were supposed to get some sort of immunities after being stunned or held or crowd controlled, essentially. But it doesn't seem to always work like that. And as you saw, I broke out a little too much. I'm pretty much out of power right now. So we're going to go and use our little friend, the barrel over there. I tried to pull our friend, and he's the one who actually pulled me. That happens. So as you can see, out of power. I should use my cola. I'm gonna try not to, but as you can see, if you don't, you get perma-stunned. Let's use our supercharged.
what
So
you've got.
essentially, you had a pretty good example of why I like to use weapon masteries. Yes, you do lose 5% of your damage. At least that's how it's supposed to work. But when you're stuck with no more power, at least you have the weapon masteries to be able to do a bit of damage. Without the weapon mastery, well, there's not much you can do. Once you run out of power, you do what you can with your weapon, but in theory, in a group, it shouldn't be too big an issue because normally you're supposed to have the controller giving you power. But sadly, we see a lot of controllers who somehow don't give much power or any power at all. So if you're in a group where either there's no controller or if the controller is not very generous in giving you power, you could run the risk of running out of power. And as you saw, there are enemies who will stun you, knock you back, stun you, knock you back, knock you down, knock you back. Uh, when that happens, you pretty much will burn through your power bar. So again, just a quick recap. So essentially, Hunt is one of the combos of one of my quick combos that I'll use more often than not. And there's also Consume Souls, which again is essentially I'll cycle between Haunt and Consume Souls, if I really don't have enough time to be able to execute a longer combo. And as you can see, it's supposed to do a bit of damage over time, and it's supposed to stun your enemies, and it does kind of work more often than not. And here again, that's our pull move and our knockout move, or knockdown move, I should say. Malediction essentially is the power I use to try to get some power back. So essentially, when I use the combos, I can deal damage over time to an enemy. I can stun it, and me and up to 7 group members can get some healing over time, equal to the damage that is dealt. That's the supercharge, which essentially works as a heal over time, and also that does damage. Essentially, it's a as the name says, it's a life drain. You drain the health from your enemies, and you and your whole group gain some health back. So that's a pretty useful supercharge to have in my book. But then again, I'm pretty sure some players would prefer to have another attack power instead, and they'll leave the healing part to the healer of the group. Plague essentially is my big damage over time. So once I execute the combo, I can deal some damage over time. Could have sworn it gave some health back, but might be just that malediction then is giving some health according to how much damage I make. And of course, Air Burst is my breakout move. I try not to use it too much because even though it does give me back some power, it doesn't give me back enough power. Like you saw in the final fight, I spammed it a bit more because I kept on being knocked out. But even though Hair Burst is supposed to give you some power back, it doesn't give you all that much power back. So essentially, I used it a bit too much, and I pretty much drained my power bar doing that. So I guess I'm toying with the idea of probably removing it since it doesn't work all that well. And again, I did mention the Consume Soul, which essentially is my pull move. So that's pretty much it for Celestial. So again, it's probably not the most powerful loadout, and as time goes by, if I see a better loadout or a loadout that I think works better, I'll probably make a follow-up video on this. But this is the loadout I use, and it works fairly well for me. So it works for me. It should work at least for some of you guys. And again, if you're using If you're using a melee weapon, you're going to get 15% extra damage with your attacks. And if you have no weapon masteries unlocked, if you have no weapon masteries unlocked, it should give you an extra 5% extra damage. And again, this is a precision-based power, so what you really want to have is precision with your character. The higher the precision and the more your combos will do damage. As opposed to with other powers, again, might is what you would like to increase to do damage with your powers. But in this case, precision is what you really want to have. And that's pretty much it. I guess I'm rambling by now. I'll probably try to make a follow-up video or two. But essentially, for those of you who had the questions about doing DPS as a celestial character, this is pretty much what I would suggest right now. Again, probably not the most powerful loadout. I'm pretty sure someone in the comment section will say how this loadout sucks and will suggest hopefully will suggest a better loadout. We'll have to wait and see for that. But again, this works well enough for me. It does enough damage for me, and it allows my character to gain enough health back to still be alive at the end of the fight. So hopefully it will work for you too, guys. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.